The North River Divine King stared coldly at Lin Feng and did not speak for a long time, allowing Lin Feng's speculations. However, the more the North River Divine King behaved like this, the more wary Lin Feng became. After a long while, the North River Divine King said faintly, "Lin Feng, do you know how difficult it is to cultivate step by step from a weak mortal life form until what I am now?" "Of course I know." "No, you don't. You're a genius, a legendary genius even in the universe. How could you understand how difficult cultivation is? It's probably been less than 1,000 years since you underwent one life transition. That's not the case for me. I'm an ordinary member of the masses, and obtained a cultivation technique by chance. My first life transition took a total of 13 years. My second life transition was almost hopeless. You cannot imagine what it's like to see zero improvement in your cultivation level, and only be able to watch helplessly as your life force dissipates with time. You would never experience that kind of despairing pain. Later, I obtained a technique that could allow constant improvement just by constantly harvesting and devouring lives. It was a wonderful feeling. It was as if the bottleneck had been broken all of a sudden. No matter how inferior one's talent was, as long as they could constantly devour, they could constantly improve. Unfortunately, there's no place to cultivate this technique at will in the vast universe. All those years, I hid everywhere and concealed myself in the dark, fearing that I'd be discovered. Later, when I arrived at the North River Galaxy, this place was in chaos. Although it was free, there were too many dangers. Powerful cultivators were fighting at all times, so not many cultivators in the entire galaxy were willing to come here. Therefore, I began to manage a territory. A century, a millennium, then 10,000 years went by. After 1,000,000 years, I realized that my territory had already expanded by tens of thousands of times. I recalled that while I was mortal, ordinary living beings reared livestock. That way, they could ensure that meat for the ordinary people was infinite. No matter how big a territory is, it's ultimately just a territory. There weren't many living beings. I had to expand my territory, and even include the entire North River Galaxy under my rule. My rules forbid wanton slaughter. The number of ordinary living beings began to increase exponentially, and the number of cultivators also began to increase exponentially. Ha ha ha, I succeeded. Through this method, I became a divine king, and I did so with ease. Those ordinary life forms are like weeds, cropping up one after another. Look, aren't their numbers constantly increasing now? I've only taken a very small portion of them. They should be grateful to me for giving them a peaceful environment. If they're lucky, they can even live an ordinary life in peace. Don't you think this is the best option for them? Hearing the North River Divine King say such as if he was talking to himself, Lin Feng's heart turned cold instead. Captive rearing of the masses. Lin Feng muttered softly. His heart was cold, and his killing intent boiled. The North River Divine King had concealed himself too deeply, and he was too cunning to actually think of such a method. The North River Divine King was practically captive rearing all life forms in the entire North River Galaxy, including cultivators. It was like rearing domestic livestock. They were reared for dozens or hundreds of years before they were harvested, and they were harvested in secret. No one could detect it. He could use various methods to incite chaotic wars in the North River Galaxy, and harvest countless living beings without anyone's knowledge. Without anyone's realization, the North River Divine King had even become a divine king. He was high and mighty, transcendent, and would never participate in the battles between the many domini and cultivators of the North River Galaxy. However, no one would have thought that the mastermind behind the battle between these domini and cultivators was the North River Divine King all along. The North River Galaxy had become the territory of the North River Divine King. It belonged to him entirely, and he could constantly devour life forms. It was just too horrific. Lin Feng did not actually know that much about fiends, but what he did know about them was definitely considerable. He knew that many talented fiends were extremely bold and devoured everything along the way, but none of them ended up well. Every venerable level fiend that appeared in the universe would basically be killed. The North River Divine King was an exception. He did not have outstanding talent, nor any special opportunities, but he was cautious and relied on the North River Galaxy to slowly ascend to power, eventually becoming a divine king. Only he, a divine king, could protect the group of fiends under his command. If Lin Feng was not wrong, there were probably more than 1 or 2 fiends in the North River Galaxy. There was an entire crowd of them. All right, Supreme Grand Emperor, now that you've learned of all of this, are you satisfied? In so many years, no one has ever heard me say this with their own ears. You should be proud. I wonder how much a genius like you can improve my combat body after devouring it. I'm really looking forward to it. The fact that the North River Divine King could say all of this probably meant that he was fully confident. So what if Lin Feng was a Supreme Grand Emperor? He was nothing in front of the North River Divine King. Lin Feng had long sensed that the North River Divine King seemed to have used some artifact to completely seal space. It was impossible for him to send news to the outside world. Moreover, so what if he sent the news to Divine King Bamond? By the time Divine King Bamond arrived, he would have long been devoured by the North River Divine King. He still had to rely on himself for everything. In the universe, be it eliminating evil, protecting oneself, or protecting one's family and friends, one's own strength was the most important thing. Lin Feng slowly closed his eyes, then suddenly opened them again. At this moment, his eyes were filled with determination. Your Majesty, everyone has their own choice. You are a fiend, and I am a cultivator. My choice was determined from the beginning, and that is to kill you. Lin Feng's massive combat body began to switch to the tidal combat body. Facing a divine king, Lin Feng did not expect to rely on his combat body to fight. However, his combat body had to be strong enough to withstand at least a few strikes from a divine king. Kill me? Ha ha ha, after so many years, no one, not even the other divine kings, dare to say that they can definitely kill me. A Supreme Grand Emperor? I'd like to see if the legendary Supreme Grand Emperor in the universe can kill a divine king above his level. North River Divine King's voice echoed through the cosmos like thunder. At the same time, the combat body on North River Divine King's body began to expand wildly. However, the North River Divine King had not used his full combat body. If he had used his full combat body, the entire North River Galaxy would be finished. This was the foundation of the North River Divine King. He would not give it up so easily. After all, it was not that easy to find another galaxy like the North River Galaxy for the captive rearing of countless lifeforms. Although his combat body no longer expanded, one of the North River Divine King's hands suddenly became infinitely huge, and there were faint traces of annihilative aura accompanying it. The law of annihilation. No, divine kings no longer comprehended laws. He had comprehended a complete principle, the principle of annihilation. A principle. The principle of annihilation. This was the first time Lin Feng had seen a complete principle. In particular, it was the principle of annihilation. This was completely filled with destruction, devastation, and was the essence of countless laws of annihilation in the universe. Lin Feng had even comprehended the law of annihilation, and the ultimate law of annihilation at that. However, after seeing this complete principle of annihilation, his law of annihilation seemed like a small boat in the sea, and entirely insignificant. In a battle between divine kings, apart from the competition of the combat body, there was actually also a competition of principles. As the principle of annihilation was activated, and the huge palm that was tens of thousands of light-years long appeared, Lin Feng felt a violent sense of threat. This was a divine king. Although the North River Divine King had not even used more than 20% of his strength, Lin Feng already felt threatened. Boom! As this palm landed, Lin Feng's combat body shook violently. The characteristics of the tidal combat body were vividly displayed at this moment. However, restorative ability was only one of the characteristics of the tidal combat body, and not its main characteristic. In a competition with a divine king, Lin Feng's law of tides gave a tenfold enhancement, and was not inferior in terms of strength. However, in a competition of laws or principles, Lin Feng suffered a crushing defeat. A large amount of annihilative power wreaked havoc in Lin Feng's body. This was what happened when annihilation reached, and even 1/10 of the combat body was instantly annihilated. This was also the reason Lin Feng used the title combat body. If it were the greater annihilative combat body or the void traversal combat body, it would probably be even worse. The Divine King did not even need to use the power of his combat body. Just using the power of the principle was enough to exhaust Lin Feng and put him in a sorry state. Fortunately, the title combat body lived up to its reputation. If the law of annihilation in his body did not work, he would resist it head-on. He managed to withstand a strike from the North River Divine King, and his combat body was rapidly recovering. Huh? You actually resisted it. The North River Divine King was a little surprised. Although he did not seem to perceive Lin Feng, the Supreme Grand Emperor, as a threat, he himself had grown to his present state since he was weak. He knew very well that even a lion must still use its full strength when hunting a rabbit. Hence, using the power of the combat body to tens of thousands of light-years was almost his limit. Any larger and the aftershock would probably be enough to destroy the North River Galaxy. Moreover, he had used the principle of annihilation. In a sense, he had already gone all out, and had no intention of underestimating Lin Feng. Even so, Lin Feng still resisted it. Even though it was a little difficult and he was in a sorry state, it was an indisputable fact that Lin Feng had blocked a strike from the Divine King. Humph! How many times can you withstand it? When the North River Divine King saw Lin Feng's battered combat body, he naturally knew that Lin Feng had lost a tenth of his combat body from the previous strike. How could Lin Feng possibly withstand a few more strikes? Could a Supreme Grand Emperor really slay a Divine King above his level? Even the legendary Supreme Grand Emperor could only contend with a Divine King at most. Slaying a Divine King above his level? It was unheard of. Rumble. The North River Divine King slammed his palm down again. It was still a huge palm with the power of the 10,000 light-year combat body. Coupled with the power of the principle of annihilation, it crushed down majestically, and even the cosmos fell silent. Lin Feng naturally understood his current situation. The title combat body could not withstand it at all. Forget about 10 times, he would probably not be able to withstand it after 3 or 5 times, and his combat body would collapse. Although his combat body had been enhanced by 10 times by law, and was also comparable to a combat body of tens of thousands of light-years, Lin Feng was helpless against the principle of annihilation wielded by the North River Divine King. The principle suppressed all laws. Even without an artifact, it would not be so easy for Lin Feng to use the ultimate law of space. He could only find a small gap to warp space and escape. This was only one principle. If there were 2 or 3 principles suppressing him, they could be superimposed. Just the power of the principles would be enough to make any Grand Emperor despair. However, Lin Feng was not an ordinary Grand Emperor. He was the Supreme Grand Emperor, a legend in the universe, the ruler of all Grand Emperors. The title of supremacy was inherently compatible with some unknown principle of the universe itself. Starfell Pearl. The Starfell Pearl in front of Lin Feng shone and expanded rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it had already become larger than a supermassive black hole. Boom! The palm of the North River Divine King and the principle of annihilation landed hard on the Starfell Pearl, but they were blocked by the Starfell Pearl. The cosmos shook, and the principle boiled, but it still could not do anything to the Starfell Pearl. There were 5 or even 6 trillion planets in the Starfell Pearl. Even Lin Feng himself did not know how many planets there were. Moreover, the materials used to refine the Starfell Pearl were countless new materials, precious cosmic materials, and a body that had transformed into the universe. Apart from the lack of chaotic energy, all of them were part of the body of a universal life form. How could the North River Divine King destroy the Starfell Pearl refined from so many precious materials so easily? Lin Feng closed his eyes. At this moment, his heart was incomparably calm. Just now, the moment the North River Divine King attacked, what did he see? He saw the vengeful spirits of countless victims, trillions of them, as if they were constantly weeping and recounting their grievances. The North River Divine King's massive combat body spanned tens of thousands of light-years, and even reached 100,000 light-years. Everything the North River Divine King had now was built upon devouring countless lives. His heinous crimes shook the universe. The vengeful spirits of countless victims wailed, and countless living beings struggled. Countless sins intertwined. Lin Feng seemed to see them all. He seemed to sense them all. Hence, the sorrow in Lin Feng's heart was brewing with killing intent, which transformed into monstrous killing intent that kept rolling, as if it would spew out at any moment. Every life form deserves their own choices. Even weak life forms are free souls. They have infinite possibilities. By devouring them, you devour their future and countless possibilities in the universe. We are cultivators. No matter how powerful, a divine king, divine venerable, divine emperor, or even a universal life form that transcends the universe. These are still life forms. No life should ever be deprived at will. Lin Feng suddenly opened his eyes. At this moment, his righteous impetus had brewed to its peak. North River Divine King, did you hear that? They are crying, struggling, and resenting. You have destroyed their futures and devoured all that they have. As a member of the vast numbers of life forms, I will kill you on their behalf. Today, I, the Supreme Grand Emperor, Lin Feng, slay this fiend in the name of trillions of living beings. At this moment, Lin Feng seemed to have understood something. His mind was incomparably clear. His mind also seemed to have sublimated at this moment. He saw the universe. It was not so cold and dark, nor was it so dead. He saw life, endless life. It was precisely due to the presence life that the entire universe was adorned with incomparable brilliance. Even though his realm had not improved at all, and even his combat body had not improved at all, and his laws still seemed to be the ultimate laws at this moment, Lin Feng felt as if his mind had sublimated, as if it was compatible with some kind of principle in the universe. A vast power filled his entire body. Starfell Pearl, eliminate the fiend. Lin Feng's voice was mighty, as if it had suddenly become the cry of billions of living beings, echoing throughout the entire cosmos. The Starfell Pearl transformed into a stream of light and smashed towards the North River Divine King. The power of the hundreds of millions of planets inside was all gathered within. Wherever the Starfell Pearl went, even the principle of annihilation was torn apart, unable to stop the Starfell Pearl at all. Bang! The Starfell Pearl struck the North River Divine King hard. The North River Divine King had only used a combat body of 10,000 light-years. This time, the Starfell Pearl sent the North River Divine King's combat body flying. Countless combat body cells were annihilated. Even a dignified Divine King could not withstand a single strike from Lin Feng's Starfell Pearl. After the North River Divine King was sent flying, the sense of confinement around Lin Feng disappeared all of a sudden. Lin Feng could warp space and leave now, but he did not warp space and leave. Instead, he only sent a message to Divine King Bamond, informing him that the North River Divine King was a fiend. Then, he flew straight towards the North River Divine King. The North River Divine King had been sent flying by the Starfell Pearl. The two of them were originally at the edge of the North River Galaxy. After the North River Divine King was sent flying, he had already flown out of the North River Galaxy. Boom! Suddenly, a vast and terrifying aura erupted in the cosmos. The surrounding space shattered, and an indescribably terrifying combat body appeared in the cosmos. 100,000 light-years. Without a doubt, this combat body had already reached 100,000 light-years, and was not inferior to Divine King Bamond at all. At a glance, it stretched as far as the eye could see, like a huge galaxy. Lin Feng, the Supreme Grand Emperor. Good, very good. North River Divine King's voice echoed in the cosmos. Killing intent surged all over his body as he stared intently at Lin Feng, especially at the Starfell Pearl in front of Lin Feng. It was that pearl. In his eyes, a tiny pearl could possess such terrifying power. It was about comparable to the power of a 50,000 light-year combat body, right? Although it was not enhanced by a principle, a strike from 50,000 light-years was still earth-shattering. Even the North River Divine King was sent flying when caught off guard. The North River Divine King was naturally furious. Lin Feng had almost escaped him. Supreme Grand Emperor, you live up to your name indeed. But you actually didn't run? Do you really think that origin weapon of yours can deal with me? The massive combat body of the North River Divine King emitted a terrifying aura, as if even the cosmos was frozen. Moreover, this was outside the North River galaxy. The North River Divine King no longer had any reservations. I told you, I will eliminate the fiend. Lin Feng had no intention of running at all. So what if it was a divine king? He was the supreme grand emperor, a legend in the universe. Today, he would slay the divine king above his level in the name of trillions of living beings. Ha! Ridiculous. Truly ridiculous. I know that you must have sent news. You destroyed my foundation for billions of years. But before I leave, I will definitely devour you. The North River Divine King used an artifact to seal space again. He hated Lin Feng to the bone. Even the North River Divine King could not bear to give up the foundation of billions of years just like that. However, he knew that Lin Feng must have informed Divine King Bamond. As a Divine King-level fiend, he could forget about staying in the North River galaxy in the future. Didn't you say that I'm a fiend? Then I'll show you what a true fiend is. Devour the universe. Boom. As the North River Divine King made a great inhale, the surrounding space immediately shattered. Countless planets flew towards the North River Divine King's mouth and were devoured by him. Everything within a radius of thousands of light-years was reduced to nothing. Moreover, what was even more terrifying was the North River galaxy. Under the suction of the North River Divine King, countless planets actually flew towards the mouth of the North River Divine King. Lin Feng had already swept through the North River galaxy, leaving only some inhabited planets. They were all territorial planets of various lesser or greater domini. There were trillions of them and countless lives. When the North River Divine King learned that his identity had been exposed, in his anger, apart from killing Lin Feng, he also wanted to completely devour his foundation of billions of years, the North River galaxy. That was a galaxy. In terms of the number of cultivators and ordinary life forms, it was far greater than other galaxies. Fiends relied on devouring life forms to become stronger. They relied on devouring and plundering to cultivate. Comprehending laws was dispensable to fiends. Ordinary fiends would not waste time comprehending laws. Only fiends who had truly reached a bottleneck and wanted to improve themselves would attempt to comprehend laws. If one wanted to become a divine king, they had to comprehend a complete principle. Otherwise, it would be useless no matter how much they devoured it. This was also why, despite having the entire North River galaxy under his command, none of the North River Divine King's disciples could become a divine king. It was because comprehending a complete principle was simply too difficult. Once the North River Divine King devoured the entire North River galaxy, how much would his strength increase? Even ordinary divine kings would probably not be his match. However, Lin Feng would not let the North River Divine King have his way. How could Lin Feng watch trillions of living beings be devoured by the North River Divine King? North River Divine King, you believe that ordinary life forms are too weak and are born to be devoured by you? You are just like the other fiends. Even if you have comprehended a complete principle, you are still a fiend. Lin Feng's mind was incomparably clear. His mental power had already been sublimated, as if it was compatible with some principle or law. This feeling was very miraculous. He could clearly sense infinite life. Even the cold universe was filled with life force. He could hear the cheers and roars of all kinds of life forms. Lin Feng could sense their fear, their joy, and all kinds of emotions. Lin Feng could sense infinite life even in the combat body of the North River Divine King. In the eyes of other cultivators, the massive combat body of the North River Divine King seemed incomparably powerful and terrifying. 100,000 light-years was enough to crush and destroy everything. However, in Lin Feng's eyes, the massive combat body of the North River Divine King was like a prison that trapped countless life forms. The extremely rich life force of the North River Divine King's combat body was formed from weak life force accumulated over time. It was all the life force of trillions of living beings. The spirits of countless victims were bellowing, howling, and struggling. Lin Feng could hear and sense them all. This was the lament of life, The Lament of the Principle. Die! The North River Divine King attacked with all his might. The Principle of Annihilation and his combat body of 100,000 light-years crushed down majestically. Even the Starfell Pearl was suppressed by the North River Divine King's power of 100,000 light-years. Could not stop the North River Divine King at all at that moment. Ha! It's your honor to be one with me and climb to the peak. Endless madness was evident in the North River Divine King's laughter. If Lin Feng lost, all the living beings in the entire North River galaxy would be devoured by the North River Divine King. The vengeful spirits of trillions of living beings in the North River Divine King's body would never be able to break free from their restraints, and they would forever become a part of the North River Divine King. At this moment, there was a strong desire in Lin Feng's heart. He yearned to help these living beings, to let them struggle free from their restraints and unleash the freedom that belonged to every living being. Buzz. Lin Feng felt as if some kind of principle was shaking in the depths of the universe, as if the principle was resonating. Boom! North River Divine King slammed his palm down, suppressing the Starfell Pearl and striking Lin Feng. Immediately, Lin Feng's 1,000-light-year combat body was shattered by the great force like melting ice. Even the recovery power of the tidal combat body was useless. This was because that was a full power strike from a divine king. Could even shatter a galaxy with a single palm strike, let alone Lin Feng's mere 1,000-light-year combat body. Supreme Grand Emperor, this ends here. A smile appeared on the North River Divine King's lips. Buzz. Suddenly, the cosmos shook. A vast, majestic, and mysterious aura instantly enveloped the entire cosmos. In particular, the traces of bloody mist that Lin Feng had already turned into seemed to be entangled with that mysterious aura. Huh? Impossible! North River Divine King's heart palpitated, and his expression changed drastically. Buzz. As the mysterious, vast, and majestic aura tangled with Lin Feng's bloody mist in the cosmos, Lin Feng's massive combat body actually gradually condensed again. No, impossible. Die! 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 How could the North River Divine King let Lin Feng condense it again? He slammed his palms down in a frenzy. Moreover, the principle of annihilation was a complete principle, enough to annihilate everything. However, at this moment, the principle of annihilation seemed to have lost its effect against that vast and mysterious aura. Could not even harm a single cell or a bloody mist. In particular, that vast and mysterious aura that shook the cosmos just now shocked the North River Divine King. The resonance of the principle. It was the resonance of the principle. This kind of principle resonance was not that easy. Even a divine king who grasped an entire principle would find it extremely difficult to resonate with the principle. He could not figure out how Lin Feng could resonate with the principle. In particular, this kind of principle was unprecedented and unheard of. Even the North River Divine King had never seen it before. He only had a vague guess that it seemed like some kind of legendary principle. However, how could such a principle appear? Buzz. The North River Divine King attacked the blood mist like a madman, and the principle of annihilation annihilated the blood mist in a frenzy. Normally, Lin Feng would have died 10,000 times over. Even divine kings and divine venerables could not save him. But now, not only was Lin Feng not dead, his combat body was even recovering rapidly under the envelopment of that mysterious aura. Even though the North River Divine King shattered Lin Feng's combat body again and again in a frenzy, it seemed to be useless. Devour the universe! Devour! The North River Divine King seemed to have gone insane. He was a dignified divine king. How could he not be able to do something? Lin Feng's current situation was too bizarre. Even his principle of annihilation could not kill Lin Feng. Hence, he simply chose to devour Lin Feng. Swish! As the North River Divine King opened his mouth, it was as if he had transformed into a black hole, devouring everything around him in a frenzy. Lin Feng's massive combat body could not withstand it either, and was about to be devoured. However, a stream of light instantly entered the North River Divine King's mouth. Immediately, the North River Divine King seemed to choke. His massive combat body struggled violently, and he stopped devouring. Taking advantage of this period of time, Lin Feng's combat body recovered. However, after recovering, the aura on Lin Feng's entire body seemed to have changed. It became deep, vast, and mysterious. Moreover, the life force in his body seemed to be infinite. At this moment, Lin Feng truly sensed the power of immortality. How does the Starfell Pearl taste like? Lin Feng spoke, his voice very calm. The stream of light that North River Divine King had swallowed just now was actually the Starfell Pearl. Now that the Starfell Pearl had entered the body of the North River Divine King, it made him feel very uncomfortable. Bang! Lin Feng pointed lightly, and a bloody hole appeared in the North River Divine King's massive combat body. The Starfell Pearl tore out a large chunk of flesh and blood as it instantly charged out of the North River Divine King's combat body and whistled into Lin Feng's hand. The North River Divine King was injured. This was the first time he had been injured since he fought with Lin Feng. A dignified Divine King was actually injured by a Grand Emperor. Even if he saw it with his own eyes, many cultivators would probably not believe it. North River Divine King, do you hear that? Those vengeful spirits are howling. They're crying and struggling. They're inside your body. Look at your bloody hole. Why hasn't your powerful combat body recovered? It's because they're struggling. They're frantically stopping you from recovering. Your body is composed of trillions of living beings that died unjustly. Lin Feng's words were very calm, but when they fell into the ears of the North River Divine King, they were deafening like a bolt from the blue. The North River Divine King seemed to really hear the roars, struggles, and shrill cries of countless vengeful spirits. He also sensed that his wound actually could not recover. This was too bizarre. He had a massive combat body of 100,000 light-years. Even if he was injured by the Starfell Pearl, he should have recovered quickly. But now he was actually unable to recover? He did not believe in vengeful spirits or sins. Even if there were vengeful spirits and sins, as a dignified divine king, why would he be afraid of those ordinary living beings? Supreme Grand Emperor, die! The North River Divine King was really getting a little spooked. Even a combat body of 100,000 light-years did not seem to give him a sense of security. Bang! Lin Feng's combat body shattered again. Even though he had the tenfold enhancement from law, comparable to a combat body of 10,000 light-years, Lin Feng was still no match for the North River Divine King's 100,000 light-year combat body, and with the principle of annihilation. However, after Lin Feng's combat body shattered, it condensed again almost immediately, and then recovered. Moreover, there did not seem to be any injuries on his body. Lin Feng's expression was still calm, and he even said with some pity, "North River Divine King, listen carefully. Are there countless vengeful spirits crying in your body? Your combat body is so powerful. But can you really control your combat body?" Ha! Lin Feng was too bizarre. Moreover, as soon as Lin Feng finished speaking, the North River Divine King seemed to really feel that he was gradually losing control over his combat body. This situation caught even the North River Divine King off guard. How could this be? The North River Divine King was really a little panicked. He was a little fearful now. He had never encountered such a strange thing. However, in Lin Feng's eyes, this was already destined. Who said that ordinary living beings were powerless? When trillions of living beings converged, when the resentment of trillions of living beings soared, even a dignified divine king would be restrained. In particular, Lin Feng could clearly feel the fury of trillions of living beings and vengeful spirits in the North River Divine King's body now. He could clearly see that the powerful 100,000 light-year combat body of the North River Divine King was already riddled with holes. It was a small amount of weak life force, accumulating bit by bit. If it were any other divine king, Lin Feng would probably be powerless. However, facing the North River Divine King, whose combat body was strengthened by devouring trillions of living beings, such a divine king was even inferior to a grand emperor to Lin Feng. North River Divine King, do you feel pain? Do you feel very helpless? Very uncertain? Your combat body was condensed from trillions of living beings. Now it's time for them to be liberated. Lin Feng pointed gently. Buzz. In the universe, It was as if some kind of principle was resonating, or some kind of law, enveloping the combat body of the North River Divine King. The North River Divine King's entire body shook. At this moment he felt his strength draining away. From the small wound created by the Starfell Pearl just now, his strength was constantly draining, like a dam breaking. It became faster and more massive. No, no, impossible! The North River Divine King roared in a frenzy. He mobilized the power of his entire combat body, trying to recover from his injury. That tiny wound was like a small hole bitten by an ant on his massive combat body. However, this insignificant small hole had become the deciding factor between the loss of strength and life force of the North River Divine King. His combat body continued to expand as the small hole expanded. His life force was also draining rapidly, and his massive combat body was even slowly collapsing. In the beginning, this small hole might only be the size of the Starfell Pearl. However, as Lin Feng activated some law, the spirits of countless victims in the body of the North River Divine King roared and struggled, frantically stopping the recovery of the injury. Moreover, traces of a strange aura instantly flew out of the wound. Only Lin Feng could sense it, and even the North River Divine King could not see it. "You are free. Go, all of you. Leave his body and you will be free," Lin Feng whispered as if in lament. In his eyes, he did see figures fly out of the wound of the North River Divine King. These figures were all living beings devoured by the North River Divine King, who had become a part of the North River Divine King's combat body. They were forever imprisoned in the North River Divine King's combat body, and could never leave. But now, as Lin Feng created the wound, these vengeful spirits quickly left the body of the North River Divine King. The massive combat body of the North River Divine King was like a balloon. Now, a small hole the size of a needle had appeared. A pinhole might be small, but air could leak continuously from it. Hence, as the vengeful spirits flew away rapidly, the combat body of the North River Divine King was also constantly shrinking and weakening. 100 million kilometers, 1 billion kilometers, 10 billion kilometers, 100 billion kilometers. A dike of 1,000 miles could be destroyed by an anthill. This was the case for the current North River Divine King. There was a small wound, but it was constantly expanding, and he was powerless to do anything. He could only watch helplessly as the wound continued to expand, and his combat body continued to collapse. After every vengeful spirit charged out of the combat body of the North River Divine King, they would feel a sense of freedom. Moreover, they would cheer and bow respectfully to Lin Feng. It was Lin Feng who gave them freedom, and it was Lin Feng who broke the restraints the North River Divine King had placed on them. North River Divine King, when you devoured countless lives, did you ever think that such a day would come? There's no need to struggle anymore. You can't kill me, but your combat body will slowly collapse, until you're completely reduced to cosmic dust. I'm not the one who killed you, but the wronged living beings you devoured. The North River Divine King still had combat power, and it was very strong. He shattered Lin Feng's combat body again and again, but Lin Feng recovered again and again. Moreover, the aura on his body did not change at all. This was a true undying body. Even when facing a divine king, he would not die. Lin Feng looked up into the depths of the universe. He could still vaguely sense that vast and mysterious aura. He knew that it was the principle of life. The previous principle resonance was actually a resonance between the principle of life and Lin Feng. Or rather, it was Lin Feng's determination that resonated with the principle of life in the universe. Lin Feng understood the essence of life and understood the freedom of life. Every life was unique and yearned for freedom. Every life had its own choice. When facing the North River Divine King, Lin Feng did not hesitate to sacrifice his life to protect these ordinary life forms. Hence, at that moment, he resonated with the principle. Then, he naturally comprehended the law of life. That's right, the law of life. Moreover, he had comprehended the ultimate law of life. He had skipped the rudimentary, elementary, and advanced planetary laws of life and directly comprehended the ultimate law of life. This was the credit of the resonance of the principle, and a reward given to Lin Feng by the principle of life. Time, life, and space were the three most mysterious laws. Among them, the law of time was the most mysterious. No one had ever comprehended the law of time. The law of life was the second. Every universe and every galaxy contained life. Even those silent beasts belonged to the category of life. However, there was basically no one who could comprehend the law of life, even at the rudimentary level. On the other hand, space was also profound, and there were very few people who comprehended it. The law of time and law of life were shrouded in a mysterious veil. Lin Feng had once tried to use the sacred stone of anathema, hoping to comprehend the law of time or law of life. Unfortunately, even with the sacred stone of anathema, he had no clue at all. This time, Lin Feng had used almost all his strength to deal with the North River Divine King. He was sincere. He could not bear to see so many lives devoured by the North River Divine King. He wanted to eliminate the fiend. Hence, what seemed like chance to Lin Feng was actually inevitable. He resonated with the principle of life and was favored by the principle of life. He directly comprehended the ultimate law of life. Of course, resonating with the principle did not mean that one could comprehend the principle. How profound was the principle of life? There was no knowing how great an opportunity it would take to comprehend it. However, after Lin Feng comprehended the ultimate law of life, he had already sensed the miraculousness of the law of life. He felt that he seemed to be able to control life force. It was not controlling life. Life could not be controlled, but he could control life force. All living beings in the universe experience birth, aging, illness, and death. It was actually the loss of life force. Lin Feng, who had comprehended the ultimate law of life, could easily revive and extend life, even for billions of years. It would not be difficult for him to stay immortal. Of course, ordinary life forms were ultimately just ordinary life forms. If they did not cultivate, their minds would lack conviction. If they really were to survive for billions of years, their wills would probably collapse. If one's will collapsed, and their convictions collapsed, there was no greater sorrow than the death of one's will. Then they would truly be dead. Even if they still had life force, it would just be an empty shell. Without a soul, they would not be a complete life form. Even so, the miraculous power of Lin Feng's ultimate law of life was incredible. The effect of the ultimate law of life on Lin Feng himself was very obvious. The most direct and outstanding effect was immortality. True immortality. Even though the North River Divine King carried the power of the principle of annihilation and wrecked Lin Feng into a bloody mist again and again, destroying Lin Feng's cells again and again, with the ultimate law of life, Lin Feng would not die and could easily recondense. That was not resurrection because Lin Feng was not dead at all. It was not resurrection, but recondensation, filled with life force. With the ultimate law of life, as long as he was in this universe, Lin Feng could use the law of life of the entire universe. He would basically be invincible and attain a true immortal body. The North River Divine King clearly learned that Lin Feng might have comprehended the legendary law of life, which had never appeared in the universe. He did not quite believe it. This was too incredulous. However, as Lin Feng used the small wound on his combat body to continuously drain his life force, no matter how incredulous the North River Divine King was, he had no choice but to believe it. He had lost. He had lost to a Supreme Grand Emperor, and a Supreme Grand Emperor who had comprehended the law of life at that. Lin Feng glared coldly at the North River Divine King. Having comprehended the ultimate law of life, Lin Feng could clearly see the weakness of the North River Divine King. That was the combat body of the North River Divine King. A combat body of 100,000 light-years was too powerful, almost comparable to Divine King Bamond. However, the North River Divine King was a fiend. He relied on devouring countless living beings time and time again to strengthen his combat body, before he could finally condense a combat body of 100,000 light-years. When fiends devoured life forms, they could increase their strength rapidly, and there was almost no bottleneck. They could obtain powerful strength in a short period of time. This was also why so many cultivators chose to become fiends. However, while the path of a fiend led to their success, it would also lead to their downfall. Perhaps even divine kings and divine venerables could not see the weakness of the North River Divine King. In fact, only Lin Feng, who had comprehended the law of life, could see the weakness of fiends. Life force was illusory. Many people could sense life force, but who could control life force without comprehending the law of life? Only Lin Feng, who had comprehended the ultimate law of life, could control life force. He could see the massive amount of life force in the body of the North River Divine King, which was almost infinite. However, at the same time, it was the life force of ordinary living beings, the life force of those vengeful spirits. Hence, Lin Feng used the ultimate law of life to liberate the vengeful spirits of those living beings, allowing them to leave with their life force and become free. From then on, the massive combat body of the North River Divine King collapsed completely. In Lin Feng's eyes, the North River Divine King was even easier to deal with than a Grand Emperor. His massive combat body was like a sieve, riddled with holes in Lin Feng's eyes. 100 billion kilometers, a trillion kilometers, a trillion kilometers. In the blink of an eye, the wound on the North River Divine King's combat body had already expanded to a radius of 1 light-year. Moreover, it was still collapsing, and the speed of collapse was becoming faster and faster. 1 light-year, 10 light-years, 100 light-years. Seeing the combat body dozens or hundreds of light-years long collapse instantly, countless vengeful spirits were cheering. Perhaps there were 10 billion living beings, 100 billion living beings, or trillions of living beings. Lin Feng did not know how many living beings had been devoured by the North River Divine King. The North River Divine King had operated in the North River Galaxy for tens of millions of years and harvested living beings regularly. Even the North River Divine King himself probably did not know how many he had devoured. But now, the North River Divine King had truly experienced the retributions for himself. It was not that retribution would not come, but that the time had yet to arrive. Fiends devoured all living beings, and all living beings could also give the fiend a fatal blow at the critical moment. This was what was happening now. The vengeful spirits in the body of the North River Divine King surged out of the North River Divine King's combat body, like a flood when a dam was broken. No, don't. It's billions of years of accumulation. It can't be. The North River Divine King was already in despair. He stared intently at Lin Feng. Now, he did not even have the intention to kill Lin Feng. He could only watch helplessly as his combat body collapsed. It was only through billions of years of cultivation that he could achieve what he had today. But now, it was destroyed overnight. In a daze, the North River Divine King even seemed to hear the screams of countless vengeful spirits. Ha! If I can devour you once, I can devour you twice or thrice. Devour! The North River Divine King went completely berserk. Ignoring the constantly expanding injuries on his combat body, he devoured the surroundings in a frenzy again. He tried to devour back all the life force he had lost. But was it possible? Lin Feng was the only one who had comprehended the ultimate law of life. The North River Divine King had not. He devoured in a frenzy, but his wound continued to expand. 100 light-years, 1,000 light-years, 3,000 light-years, 5,000 light-years, 8,000 light-years. As they watched the combat body of the North River Divine King collapse continuously in an area of almost thousands of light-years, countless living beings were liberated. The spirits of countless victims even expressed their gratitude to Lin Feng. Lin Feng also felt very happy deep down. Every life should be free from restraints. Only 1,000 light-years were left of the combat body of the North River Divine King, and it was still collapsing. Only now did he seem to have finally come to a realization, and tried to escape. However, how could he escape while Lin Feng was here? Boom! Lin Feng extended his huge palm and grabbed the North River Divine King, who only had a combat body of 100 light-years left. Moreover, the North River Divine King's combat body of 100 light-years was still collapsing continuously. Death was already approaching the North River Divine King. At this moment, the North River Divine King was already in despair. Law of life. It's the law of life. I never expected a supreme Grand Emperor like you to actually comprehend the ultimate law. My loss is not unfair. In the end, on the verge of death, the North River Divine King actually regained his senses. He no longer struggled, nor did he go mad. He already knew his outcome. Lin Feng, you can stop me, all the fiends. But can you stop the chaos in the North River Galaxy? Ha ha ha, you can't stop it. Without me, without the fiends, they will still kill each other. And it will even become more chaotic. More living beings will die. Lin Feng shook his head and said, That's not a reason for you to become a fiend. I'll restructure order in the North River Galaxy and restore peace to it. As for you and the other fiends in the North River Divine Palace, you'll become history forever. Lin Feng clenched his hand. At once, North River Divine King, who was only dozens of light years now, was instantly reduced to a bloody mist. Under the detection of Lin Feng's ultimate law of life, there was no possibility for the North River Divine King to recover. There was a sound of wailing. Faint, mournful cries seemed to echo through the entire cosmos. With the fall of a divine king, the principal wailed. This was the lament of the principal, which meant that a divine king had fallen. The dignified North River Divine King had fallen at the hands of the Supreme Grand Emperor. Go, go. You are free, all of you. Lin Feng waved his hand, and countless living beings and vengeful spirits cheered and flew towards the universe. In reality, once they left the combat body of the North River Divine King, they would be reduced to ashes and cosmic dust in the blink of an eye. However, to them, this was true liberation. They were no longer imprisoned forever. This was the freedom of life. The North River Divine King was dead, completely dead. However, the area where the two of them fought had already become a dead land. The space that had been broken here would probably take billions of years to recover. There had once been a great battle between divine kings. Just the aftershock of the battle alone had destroyed countless galaxies. Fortunately, the North River Galaxy was still relatively intact. Despite the North River Divine King devouring it in a frenzy previously, while it had suffered some losses, its foundation was not damaged. This was a blessing amidst misfortune. It was also the result of Lin Feng's efforts to stop the North River Divine King. Buzz. Suddenly, traces of spatial ripples appeared in the cosmos, spreading in all directions. At the same time, a terrifying aura emitted from the spatial passage. It was not inferior to the previous North River Divine King. This was also a Divine King. North River Divine King, you deserve death. There was a trace of anxiety and anger mixed in that voice. It was Divine King Bamond. After Divine King Bamond received Lin Feng's message, he warped space and rushed over immediately. The fact that a Divine King was actually a fiend caught Divine King Bamond off guard. He never expected that the North River Divine King could actually be a fiend. However, he still rushed over immediately. He could not afford accidents when it came to Lin Feng. Lin Feng was a certain future divine emperor, and he absolutely would not allow anything to happen to Lin Feng. Originally, Divine King Bamond thought that with Lin Feng's strength, he could roam anywhere he wanted in the world. However, who would have thought that the North River Divine King was actually a fiend? When Divine King Bamond descended into the North River Galaxy in fury, he saw Lin Feng at first glance. Fortunately, Lin Feng's aura was very normal. Nothing had happened to him. Your Majesty! Lin Feng was also very touched. The speed at which Divine King Bamond arrived was already very fast. After all, the North River Galaxy was too far from the Bamond Galaxy. Lin Feng, it's good that you're fine. Humph, who'd have thought that the North River Divine King is actually a fiend? Fortunately, he knew his place and escaped quickly. Divine King Bamond snorted coldly. In his opinion, the North River Divine King must have fled immediately because he was worried that his identity would be exposed and a Divine King would rush over. That was just as well. As long as Lin Feng was fine, Divine King Bamond would be satisfied. As for the North River Divine King on the run, the other Divine Kings definitely would not sit back and do nothing about a fiend who had become a Divine King. Even some ancient Divine Venerables would attack. Divine King Bamond heaved a sigh of relief, but did not see Lin Feng shake his head discreetly, his expression rather helpless. If he told Divine King Bamand the truth now, would Divine King Bamand believe him? Your Majesty, actually, the North River Divine King is already dead. After a long while, Lin Feng finally heaved a long sigh and spoke slowly. What did you say? The North River Divine King is dead. Divine King Bamand's eyes widened. He looked around Lin Feng again. It was sinister and terrifying. There was nothing everywhere, not even a spatial fragment. This was clearly a battlefield, and there was definitely a battle between Divine King-level powerhouses. Otherwise, it was impossible for there to be such terrifying destructive power. Which Divine King did it? Divine King Bamand's first thought was that some Divine King had attacked. Otherwise, how could the North River Divine King have fallen? Your Majesty, you are the first Divine King to arrive here. Besides you, what other Divine King would I know? No Divine King? But that's not right. If there wasn't a Divine King, how could the North River Divine King have fallen? Could it be? Divine King Bamand seemed to realize something later. He suddenly raised his head and stared at Lin Feng, his eyes filled with disbelief. Could it be that Your Majesty has guessed it? That's right. I was the one who killed the North River Divine King. As soon as Lin Feng finished speaking, the entire cosmos fell incomparably silent. Even Divine King Bamand seemed to be shocked and did not speak for a long time. Divine Kings were the true experts who stood at the peak of the entire universe. Be it Divine Venerables or Divine Emperors, they were all Divine Kings in terms of realms. In other words, they had only undergone 9 life transitions. They were the same in terms of essence of life. The Divine Kings were high up and dominated everything. They had never heard of Divine Kings being killed by cultivators below the level of Divine Kings, even if Lin Feng was the legendary Supreme Grand Emperor in the universe. Lin Feng, you killed the North River Divine King, but how is that possible? Divine King Bamand still did not quite believe it. It was true that Lin Feng was the Supreme Grand Emperor, but even the Supreme Grand Emperor would be lucky to survive against a Divine King. It was precisely because Divine King Bamand knew very well about Divine Kings, and of the insurmountable gap between Grand Emperors and Divine Kings, that he rushed over the moment Lin Feng sent the news. He was afraid that if he arrived too late, Lin Feng would be killed. But now, what did he hear? Lin Feng had actually killed the Divine King as a Grand Emperor. This sounded more like a fantasy. Your Majesty, can I trust you? Ha! Divine King Bamand did not understand what Lin Feng was trying to say. Actually, Lin Feng already trusted Divine King Bamand very much. Divine King Bamand had rushed to him immediately. Furthermore, under the detection of Lin Feng's ultimate law of life, Divine King Bamand felt completely different from the North River Divine King. That exuberant life force was smelted together like an iron plate. Moreover, there seemed to be a huge furnace in his body. It was the furnace of life, representing the exuberant life force of Divine King Bamand. It belonged entirely to Divine King Bamand himself. Divine King Bamand was not a fiend. The current Lin Feng had comprehended the ultimate law of life. In a sense, he was the nemesis of fiends. No fiend could hide from Lin Feng. No matter how well they hid themselves, it was useless. Actually, I've comprehended the ultimate law of life. Lin Feng pointed lightly, and Divine King Bamand felt his entire body enveloped by a strange law. It was vast, mysterious, and majestic. All life forms would revere the law of life. Law of life? A sharp glint flashed across Divine King Bamand's eyes. The law of life. Forget about him. Even Divine Venerables and Divine Emperors had never seen the law of life. No, none of them. Divine King Bamand could not be certain, but he was more convinced that this was true. Lin Feng would not lie to him, and there was no need to lie to him. Moreover, Lin Feng's own experience was a legend. Back when Lin Feng returned to the Divine Palace of Bamand as a seed disciple, he was not even a planetary lifeform. Divine King Bamand could even be considered to have watched Lin Feng grow from an ordinary mortal lifeform to a planetary lifeform. Since the beginning, Lin Feng had displayed astonishing aptitude in laws. In the end, Lin Feng even became a legend in the universe, the Supreme Grand Emperor. Lin Feng had been a legend his entire life. What was so strange about comprehending the law of life? Lin Feng, it's not that I don't believe you, but that this is too unbelievable. Since the birth of the universe, no one has been able to comprehend the law of life. You, Divine King Bamon's gaze was complicated. He did not know if he believed it. Your Majesty, please attack me with your full strength. Huh? Attack you? That's right. Your Majesty. Wouldn't you like to see the wonders of the ultimate law of life? Divine King Bamon's eyes lit up. That's right. Even though Lin Feng had personally admitted that he had already comprehended the ultimate law of life, Divine King Bamon still did not quite believe it without seeing it with his own eyes. Now that he had the chance to witness the wonders of the ultimate law of life, Divine King Bamon was naturally very curious. A strike from a Divine King is no small matter. Your Majesty, please give your all. Lin Feng simply deployed his combat body. The 1,000 light-year combat body stretched across an empty cosmos. Divine King Bamon's expression was solemn. He also deployed his combat body. Vast and majestic, it exceeded 100,000 light-years slightly, and was similar to the combat body of the North River Divine King. However, in Lin Feng's eyes, there was a fundamental difference in their life force. Divine King Bamon's life force was as exuberant as a furnace, simply stronger than any star. On the other hand, the life force of the North River Divine King imprisoned the life force of countless mortal lifeforms. The two were not comparable. Perhaps their strength was about the same. Boom! Divine King Bamon attacked. He did not really unleash his full strength, and only used 30% of his strength. However, even 30% of his strength was no small matter. Even if Lin Feng had a tenfold enhancement from law, he would not be able to withstand it. Bang! Lin Feng's combat body shattered with a bang, but it was broken. With the tenfold enhancement of Lin Feng's law, he could still reach the power of a combat body of tens of thousands of light-years. This strike was still unable to completely crush his combat body. Not enough, far from enough. Lin Feng's entire body emitted a powerful aura. Divine King Bamon was different from North River Divine King. Divine King Bamon's life force was unbreakable, like a furnace. Lin Feng could not rely on the ultimate law of life to deal with Divine King Bamon. However, it was completely impossible for Divine King Bamon to kill him as well. Again, Divine King Bamon used all his strength this time. He unleashed all of his strength, and it struck Lin Feng's combat body majestically. Immediately, Lin Feng's combat body was blasted apart. Looking at the bloody mist in the cosmos, Divine King Bamon was stunned. Dead? Lin Feng was dead? Divine King Bamon could not believe it. Lin Feng had already been reduced into a bloody mist. Even a Divine King would be dead. No matter how strong one's restorative ability was, they could not recover from this. This was the power of a Divine King, which could annihilate everything. However, Divine King Bamon's worries quickly disappeared. The bloody mist quickly condensed. Then, in a vast, mysterious, and majestic aura, Lin Feng's combat body condensed again. It returned to its original state, and even its aura did not change at all. Divine King Bamon's eyes widened. This was not a simple restorative ability. The law of life. This is the law of life. You are immortal, truly immortal. Everything was clear now. Divine King Bamon finally believed that Lin Feng had the ability to kill the North River Divine King. An undying body, Lin Feng had actually relied on the ultimate law of life to possess an immortal body. The thought that they were about to head to the Silent Galaxy used to make him worry about Lin Feng's safety. Now, Divine King Bamon no longer had any worries. Good, very good. With an undying body and the ultimate law of life, no one can kill you. Ha ha ha. Let's see what other reason those old fellows have for not letting you go to the Silent Galaxy now. Divine King Bamon believed that after today, Lin Feng's reputation as the Supreme Grand Emperor would truly resound throughout the entire universe. He was not inferior to any Divine King. Apart from Lin Feng, who else could comprehend the ultimate law of life? As for hiding his strength, That was not necessary at all. Lin Feng had the ultimate law of life. Who could kill him? From then on, Lin Feng, the Supreme Grand Emperor, could be considered one of the top experts in the universe. Lin Feng, are you coming back to the Bamand Galaxy with me? No, Your Majesty. Please go back first. Thank you for rushing over. Although the North River Divine King is dead, the North River Galaxy is a place of villainous collusion and already in chaos. I want to rectify things. Divine King Bamand pondered for a moment and said, all right, whether you stay in the Divine Palace of Bamand in the future, you'll always be a disciple of the Divine Palace of Bamand. Just don't miss the time we're going to the Silent Galaxy. With that, Divine King Bamand warped space and left. Perhaps Divine King Bamand also realized that with Lin Feng's current development potential, it was probably impossible for him to continue staying in the Divine Palace of Bamand. Even though the Divine Palace of Bamand was a Divine King-level faction, it was still too small for Lin Feng. Which Divine King would not establish their own faction? This North River Galaxy would probably be Lin Feng's sphere of influence in the future and Lin Feng's foundation. However, Divine King Bamand did not mind at all. Limiting a Divine King in the Divine Palace of Bamand forever? He had never considered it. Forget about a powerful Grand Emperor like Lin Feng. Even Grand Emperor Long Yuan would definitely leave the Divine Palace of Bamand and establish his own faction if he metamorphosed into a Divine King one day. The reason was very simple. Which top-notch hegemon wanted to be restrained. Hence, Divine King Bamand would not hold Lin Feng back at all. The Divine Palace of Bamand was not Lin Feng's after all. However, even if he established a new faction, Divine King Bamand would not be displeased. Lin Feng ultimately came from the Divine Palace of Bamand. He had grown step by step from the Divine Palace of Bamand, and his relationship with the Divine Palace of Bamand could not be severed, no matter what. This was good enough. After Divine King Bamand left, Lin Feng quickly shrank his combat body to an ordinary size. There's still a den of fiends of various scales in the North River Galaxy. It's time to clean them up completely. A cold glint flashed across Lin Feng's eyes. He would never show mercy to fiends. Now that he had comprehended the ultimate law of life, he was even more reverent towards life forms. Naturally, he had no good impression of those fiends who devoured life for fun. There was no place for fiends in the North River Galaxy. Swoosh! Lin Feng flew into the North River Galaxy again. What he was going to do next was very simple. Slay the fiends. The 8 Grand Emperors of the North River Divine Palace were all guarding the North River Divine Palace. In reality, there was no need for them to guard it. With the reputation of the North River Divine Palace alone, who would dare to attack it? Although the 8 Grand Emperors were usually awe-inspiring and domineering in their respective territories, they were trembling in fear in the North River Divine Palace. They spoke and acted cautiously, not daring to be impudent at all. It's about time, right? His Majesty the Divine King should have already dealt with the Supreme Grand Emperor, Lin Feng. Speaking of which, this Lin Feng is really incredible. He's a legend in the universe. How did he become the Supreme Grand Emperor? Just looking at that 1,000 light-year combat body, he must have cultivated the legendary consummate combat body. Consummate combat body. The 8 Grand Emperors were all fiends, and they were great fiends that had devoured countless living beings. They were spread throughout the entire North River Galaxy, and were actually acting as the informants of the North River Divine King. Every time the North River Galaxy was in chaos, the 8 of them were the masterminds. Every time the North River Divine King devoured a large number of living beings, he would allow them to devour a little. However, just this little amount allowed them to successfully become Grand Emperors. Of course, all of them were outstanding figures who had even comprehended the ultimate law and become top-notch Grand Emperors. Only then could they work for the North River Divine King directly. In the North River Galaxy, there were still many Grand Emperors. Although they were not top-notch Grand Emperors, they were also fiends. The reason they could not become top-notch Grand Emperors was that they could not comprehend the ultimate law. Fiends only needed to constantly devour to become stronger, undergo constant metamorphosis, and increase their strength very quickly. However, they also had a disadvantage, which was their flaw in comprehending laws. Most fiends did not even comprehend laws at all. Only after becoming a Grand Emperor, and if they wanted to advance further to become a top-notch Grand Emperor, or if had greater ambitions and wanted to metamorphose into a divine king like the North River Divine King, would they focus on comprehending laws. They were fiends, yet they could comprehend ultimate laws. It was enough to show that before the 8 of them became fiends, they were also incredibly talented. But in order to increase their strength as fast as possible, they took the wrong path. Despite this, they could not cultivate the consummate combat body. Even if they devoured continuously, it would be very difficult to cultivate the consummate combat body. Even ambitious fiends would be deterred. Thinking about how Lin Feng had cultivated the consummate combat body and metamorphosed into a Grand Emperor, the 8 of them were actually rather impressed. Everyone, the 3rd disciple, is dead. After His Majesty the Divine King deals with Lin Feng, the region the 3rd disciple was in charge of will probably have to be divided properly among us. One of the Grand Emperors mentioned Grand Emperor North Mountain. The 9 top-notch Grand Emperors were actually all in charge of a certain region of the North River Galaxy. Once anyone died, the other top-notch Grand Emperors would divide the area. The larger the region they're in charge of, the heavier the responsibility. For example, every time it was time for harvest, a large amount of living beings had to be harvested. There was a certain degree of risk involved. However, at the same time, the greater the risk, the greater the gain. If the region one was in charge of was large, even the little amount left over after the North River Divine King devoured the living beings would be enough to make every top-notch Grand Emperor envious. The 3rd disciple, Grand Emperor North Mountain, was dead. The other 8 Grand Emperors would not feel any grief or regret. They would only be happy, because they could now divide Grand Emperor North Mountain's territory. His Majesty the Divine King will exercise his judgment regarding the 3rd disciple's territory. I think you should behave yourselves. His Majesty the Divine King has been in a bad mood recently. A Supreme Grand Emperor like Lin Feng is very likely to expose our secret. Let's deal with the matter at hand first. After His Majesty the Divine King deals with Lin Feng, we still have to deal with the impact Lin Feng has brought about perfectly. Some Grand Emperors were very rational. Although benefits were tempting, they had not forgotten what their foundation was. Their foundation was the North River Galaxy. Only when the secret of the North River Galaxy was not exposed could they follow the North River Divine King and slowly accumulate power. As time passed, there was nothing to say that no one among them could metamorphose and become a divine king. Even fiends had pursuits. They pursued powerful strength. Speaking of which, it's been so long. Why hasn't His Majesty the Divine King returned? The 8 Grand Emperors were all a little confused. Every time the North River Divine King attacked, he would definitely attack with thunderous force. Even a lion must use its full strength when hunting a rabbit. The North River Divine King would never underestimate anyone. Once the North River Divine King attacked, he would definitely resolve the problem as soon as possible. But now, after so long, the North River Divine King had yet to return. This was indeed a little strange. Could His Majesty have failed? Failed? Impossible. His Majesty the Divine King brought an artifact that could seal space. Even if Lin Feng has comprehended the ultimate law of space, he can't warp space to escape. Could Lin Feng have informed Divine King Bamond in advance? At the mention of Divine King Bamond, the 8 Grand Emperors' hearts tightened. They were afraid that Divine King Bamond would come here. If Divine King Bamond found out about the secret of the North River Galaxy, even if North River Divine King could escape, what about them? At that time, only death awaited them. Huh? Someone is here. Some Grand Emperors seem to have sensed something. The Grand Emperors all scanned the cosmos with their mental power. But with this sweep, the expressions of the 8 Grand Emperors changed drastically. The Supreme Grand Emperor, Lin Feng? The 8 Grand Emperors were shocked. Lin Feng had suddenly appeared in the North River Divine Palace, but the North River Divine King had disappeared. How could they not be shocked? As fiends, you deserve death. Suddenly, Lin Feng spoke. The cold voice echoed in the cosmos for a long time. He's found out. the expressions of the 8 Grand Emperors changed abruptly. Seeing Lin Feng's cold expression in the cosmos, the expressions of the 8 Grand Emperors changed drastically. Clearly, the matter had been exposed. Lin Feng had already learned the secret that they were fiends. However, how did Lin Feng come to the North River Divine Palace? Where was the North River Divine King? Everyone, things are troublesome. The North River Divine King did not kill Lin Feng. He was clearly delayed by something. Or maybe he was held back by the other Divine Kings. Everyone, don't forget that the Divine Palace of Bamand is behind Lin Feng. That's right. The North River Divine King might have been held back. This means that our secret has been exposed. There's no place for us in the North River Galaxy anymore. We have to escape as soon as possible. That's right, run. Run at all costs. However, if Lin Feng is around, he probably came specially to the North River Divine Palace to stop us. We have to chase him away or even kill him before we can make our dismal retreat from the North River Galaxy. Then we'll kill him. The Supreme Grand Emperor? Humph, he's lucky that he didn't encounter His Majesty the Divine King. Otherwise, how could he have survived to come here to stop us? Slaying fiends? That would take the ability to slay fiends. The 8 Grand Emperors could all be considered experienced fiends. They dominated the cosmos and devoured countless living beings. They had probably devoured even many Grand Emperors. The Supreme Grand Emperor was invincible? They did not believe it. Even if they did, they would not give up without putting up a fight. They would definitely fight to the death. The 8 top-notch Grand Emperors joined forces. For a moment, their auras were overwhelming. Although they all had their own selfish motives, they knew very well that once their secret was exposed, they could only run. Even with the North River Divine King around, they had to run. If they wanted to escape, they had to defeat or even kill the Supreme Grand Emperor in front of them. Kill! The 8 top-notch Grand Emperors immediately used their combat bodies. Rumble! The 8 combat bodies were all above 10 light-years in size. Moreover, they had all comprehended ultimate laws. They were also savage and cunning fiends, enough to stir the cosmos. No one would underestimate this power. However, Lin Feng's expression was very calm. Only when the 8 Grand Emperors used their combat bodies did his gaze become even sharper, and the killing intent on his body boiled even more. He heard the roars of countless vengeful spirits and countless living beings in the combat bodies of the 8 Grand Emperors. The shrill cries shook even Lin Feng's heart. Death was too good for all of these fiends. The 8 Grand Emperors were already charging towards Lin Feng, but Lin Feng did not even use his combat body. If it were any other Grand Emperor, Lin Feng would have no choice but to use his combat body to deal with them. However, these 8 Grand Emperors were genuine fiends. Against fiends, Lin Feng could be considered their true nemesis. You will bear the consequences of your own sins. Lin Feng extended his hand and pointed. Immediately, the ultimate law of life descended, instantly enveloping the 8 Grand Emperors. In an instant, the roars, and cries of countless vengeful spirits were incessant. The combat bodies of the 8 Grand Emperors seemed to be out of control at this moment, and began to explode. However, the 8 Grand Emperors could do nothing. What's going on? My combat body, no? Impossible, impossible. The 8 Grand Emperors seemed mad. A trace of panic appeared on their faces. They had never encountered such a thing. How could their combat bodies be out of control? Their combat bodies were indeed no longer under control. Lin Feng's ultimate law of life descended. He controlled the life force of countless living beings in the combat bodies of the 8 Grand Emperors, and instantly broke through the fiends' combat bodies. Countless living beings and vengeful spirits fought to escape. They expressed their gratitude to Lin Feng from afar, then rushed into the universe in jubilation. Finally, they disappeared and turned into cosmic dust. Countless living beings who had died unjustly were liberated. Go. You're free. You're all free. Looking at the smiles of countless living beings, and then at the countless living beings turning into cosmic dust. Although they had been freed, Lin Feng's heart was filled with sorrow and pain. These billions of living beings disappeared completely, just like that. It was these fiends that devoured countless living beings and imprisoned them in their combat bodies, causing them to be imprisoned and never see freedom for all eternity. The combat bodies of these 8 grand emperors and great fiends all collapsed. They could not figure out why their combat bodies had collapsed before Lin Feng even attacked. Their strength was still constantly depleting. They had fallen from top-notch grand emperors to grand emperors, then to venerables, and finally, they were even inferior to ordinary planetary lifeforms. It was over. It was completely over. The billions of years of bitter cultivation had all come to nothing now. How can this be? The 8 grand emperors wore dismal expressions as they watched their combat bodies collapse bit by bit. This was even more unbearable than killing them. However, they did not know that their combat bodies were condensed from the life force of countless ordinary living beings, and their combat bodies never belonged to them to begin with. Lin Feng was just freeing those ordinary living beings completely now. To deal with the North River Divine King, Lin Feng still needed to use the Starfell Pearl to create a small wound on the North River Divine King's combat body. Only then could Lin Feng use the ultimate law of life to collapse his combat body, with that small wound as the epicenter. Lin Feng did not need to go through so much trouble with these grand emperors at all. With a wave of his hand, he could completely decompose the combat bodies of these grand emperors, depriving them of the life force of countless beings in their combat bodies. Boom! Lin Feng clenched his hand, and the 8 grand emperors were all reduced to ashes, disappearing completely. The deaths of 8 grand emperors was not a secret. Many cultivators in the North River Divine Palace also witnessed all of this. Even some powerful domini noticed the commotion in the North River Divine Palace. All of them were shocked and bewildered. Since when did anyone dare to push the North River Divine Palace around? However, when they saw the Supreme Grand Emperor, Lin Feng, kill 8 Grand Emperors with a wave of his hand, all of them fell silent. In the past, some people might not have believed that Lin Feng was the Supreme Grand Emperor, but now, seeing Lin Feng kill 8 top-notch Grand Emperors with a wave of his hand, this unpredictable method shocked countless cultivators. Moreover, there was more to come. Lin Feng scanned with his mental power and used the law of life to make a detection. He realized that all the cultivators in the North River Divine Palace, be they ordinary planetary cultivators, some venerables, quasi-emperors, or ordinary grand emperors, were all fiends without exception. How was this the North River Divine Palace? It was clearly a den of evil. It was a den full of fiends. Lin Feng would not show any mercy in such a situation. He clapped his hand, and the huge palm slammed hard into the North River Divine Palace. Boom! The North River Divine Palace that had stood tall in the North River Galaxy for billions of years had completely turned into cosmic dust. As for the den of fiends of various levels inside, they had all been reduced to ashes. The North River Divine Palace was gone. But there must be more fiends in the North River Galaxy. Lin Feng might not be able to make the entire universe free of fiends, but he could at least make sure fiends were gone from the North River Galaxy from now on. The commotion caused by the destruction of the North River Divine Palace was far stronger than Lin Feng had imagined. Lin Feng had killed 8 top-notch Grand Emperors with a wave of his hand and destroyed the North River Divine Palace. He had no intention of hiding it at all. Hence, many cultivators had already witnessed this change with their own eyes. Even the North River Divine Palace has been destroyed. What's going on? Where's the North River Divine King? Why hasn't anyone seen him appear yet? So this is the Supreme Grand Emperor? I didn't believe in the Supreme Grand Emperors in the past, but those were 8 top-notch Grand Emperors. He killed 8 top-notch Grand Emperors with a wave of his hand. Apart from Divine Kings, who else could do it? The Supreme Grand Emperor, Lin Feng, is invincible among all below the Divine King realm. All kinds of news spread throughout the entire North River Galaxy like a storm. However, this was not the end. Just as everyone was speculating where the North River Divine King had gone, Lin Feng made a new move. He kept hunting down some Grand Emperors and Venerables in the North River Galaxy, not even sparing ordinary planetary lifeforms. For a moment, everyone was living under a sense of crisis. Many domini of various levels felt threatened. Some were even prepared to retreat from the North River Galaxy first. Some people felt that Lin Feng's massacre was simply insane, but some people felt that there must be something more to it. As expected, news spread one after another that everyone below the North River Divine King was a fiend in the North River Divine Palace. Not only did the Supreme Grand Emperor, Lin Feng, kill 8 top-notch Grand Emperors and destroy the North River Divine Palace, even the North River Divine King died at Lin Feng's hands. Incredible. This was simply explosive news. A Grand Emperor could kill a Divine King above his level? Even in the entire history of the universe, such a precedent could not be found. A Grand Emperor was a Grand Emperor. Even a Supreme Grand Emperor would be fortunate enough to be able to contend against a Divine King. Killing a Divine King above his level was tantamount to a fantasy. Most cultivators did not believe it, but as time passed, and Lin Feng hunted down some domini without holding back, some cultivators began to launch bold investigations of their own. They found out that the cultivators Lin Feng had killed were indeed all fiends. For a moment it caused an uproar. Many cultivators gradually believed that the North River Divine Palace was probably really a den of evil. Of course, it was impossible for Lin Feng to hunt down all the fiends. However, he only needed to sweep through the entire North River Galaxy. It did not matter if the people of the North River Galaxy believed that he had killed the North River Divine King. The North River Divine King would never appear again. It was only natural for Lin Feng to reorganize the North River Galaxy. He had already displayed strength that surpassed all Grand Emperors. Whether Lin Feng was comparable to a Divine King or not was the same for those cultivators. In any case, they were far from his match. The name of the Supreme Grand Emperor gradually spread from the North River Galaxy to various parts of the universe. The legendary deed of him slaying the Divine King above his level also spread to the depths of the universe. Even the Divine Kings and Divine Venerables knew the name of the Supreme Grand Emperor, Lin Feng. This is the place. Lin Feng returned to the Guardian Domain and moved the Vigil Domain, Guardian Domain, and Scorpius Domain out of the Void Sky Divine Palace. Boom! The cosmos shook slightly, and 3 huge domains appeared in the empty cosmos at once, with the Scorpius Domain being the largest. Grand Emperor Scorpius and Venerable Vigil looked at Lin Feng with a trace of reverence. Reverence and awe were no longer enough to express the emotions in their hearts. They had always been in the Void Sky Divine Palace, but occasionally Grand Emperor Scorpius and Venerable Vigil would also come out. When they learned that Lin Feng had killed the North River Divine King as a Grand Emperor, killed 8 top-notch Grand Emperors with a wave of his hand, and hunted down fiends without holding back in the North River Galaxy, both of them were dumbfounded and could not recover for a long time. Even though they knew many of Lin Feng's secrets, they still found it unbelievable. However, Lin Feng would not lie to them. It seemed like the North River Divine King was really dead. A fiend that had cultivated to the level of a Divine King was probably rare even in the universe. Moreover, the North River Divine King had reared all the cultivators and ordinary living beings in the North River Galaxy like livestock, reaping them every once in a while. Just the thought of it made them shudder, especially Grand Emperor Scorpius. He was a dignified Grand Emperor, and had been in the North River Galaxy for quite some time, yet he actually had not discovered it. Brother Lin Feng, what are your future plans? Grand Emperor Scorpius looked at the Scorpius Domain, Vigil Domain, and Guardian Domain. They were still in the North River Galaxy. Lin Feng probably planned to stay in the North River Galaxy as well. The North River Galaxy is a good place. In the past, the North River Divine King and the North River Divine Palace caused chaos. But now, the North River Divine King is dead, and the North River Divine Palace has been destroyed. But the North River Galaxy cannot continue to be in chaos. I want to reorganize the North River Galaxy and establish a new order. Grand Emperor Scorpius's eyes lit up. Lin Feng was going to replace the North River Divine Palace. Brother Lin Feng, since you've decided to make the North River Divine Palace your foundation, we won't leave anymore. Venerable Vigil, what about you? Grand Emperor Scorpius looked at Venerable Vigil. Of course, Venerable Vigil knew what Grand Emperor Scorpius meant. He smiled and said, "Of course I won't leave. I've been in the North River Galaxy for so many years. This is actually my home and my foundation. I don't want to leave unless absolutely necessary. Brother Linfeng, why don't we merge the Vigil domain, Scorpius domain, and Guardian domain into one domain? Then, with this domain as the foundation, we can establish a faction similar to the North River Divine Palace to rule the surroundings and maintain the stability of the North River Galaxy. Actually, that was what Lin Feng intended as well. He nodded and said, "That's what I was thinking. Since you've all agreed, we'll merge into one domain." Lin Feng made a grabbing motion with his hand, and the territorial planets of the three domains began to merge. With the Guardian planet as the core, a huge domain gradually formed. That was not all. Lin Feng began to set up a cosmic array. The cosmic arrays of the North River Galaxy were simply too crude. Lin Feng had learned many cosmic arrays in the Silent Galaxy. Coupled with Lin Feng's law of space, it took Lin Feng 3 months to finally set up a huge cosmic array. Once this cosmic array was activated, it could withstand the attacks of top-notch Grand Emperors. It could be said to be impregnable, and could be considered the strongest cosmic array in the North River Galaxy. Lin Feng divided the authority of the cosmic array into 3 parts. 2 of them were given to Grand Emperor Scorpius and Venerable Vigil. After all, these 2 people were the people Lin Feng trusted the most at the moment. Lin Feng gave Lin Shang the other portion. As for Lin Feng himself, would he need the protection of the cosmic array? If there was an enemy that even Lin Feng could not deal with, this cosmic array would be useless. Moreover, he often left the North River Galaxy and would not stay in it for long periods. Brother Lin Feng, since you can defy a divine king, you have the combat power of a divine king. If you want to rule the North River Galaxy and maintain stability, you probably have to establish a divine palace too. Establish a divine palace? Lin Feng thought about it carefully and felt that establishing the divine palace was very necessary. The divine palace was not something that could be established casually. Normally, anyone who could establish a divine palace in the universe had to preside over it as a divine king. Even if the current Lin Feng was slightly inferior to divine King Bamond, the other party could not kill him. Moreover, against some weaker divine kings, such as divine kings whose combat bodies had not reached 100,000 light-years, Lin Feng's strength would not be inferior by relying on the Starfell Pearl. Hence, it was not an exaggeration to say that Lin Feng had the combat power of a divine king. Lin Feng was already qualified to establish a divine palace. Once the divine palace was established, it could rule the surrounding areas in the name of the divine palace and establish a new order in the North River Galaxy. Let's call the Guardian Divine Palace. Lin Feng already had some ideas for the divine palace. The new order he wanted to create was also closely related to the concept of Guardian.